Okay, everything's ready? Fine. Good afternoon once again. My 5th consecutive year. I cannot believe it. It seems that you like my presentations. My Spanish improved a lot in the last 5 years, so you will understand me better. And for your expectations, this will take 45 minutes and not half an hour. This year is very interesting because there are 4 or 5 times that I told you last year would happen. This year happened. So this is what I will talk about. Today we'll talk about the success recipes, and in some cases led to failure of the industry titans. Second, we'll talk about today's recipes for success. And finally, we'll talk about the recipes that will be very successful tomorrow. So let me start with this, which I included in my Twitter. It says, walk and the world will walk with you. Stop and the world will keep on walking. And that, I think, is a summary of what the industry will work for is. If you stop, the competitors will keep on moving. So with my presentation, you will learn about those things where you should not stop and things you should adopt in the future. It's very similar to what I said last year. It's like a trilogy. It's like a Star Wars. Remember the Scrooge? I talked about you this last year. BlackBerry, Nokia, and Microsoft. I told you what was going to happen to them this year. Well, let's see what happened to each of them in terms of recipes. Remember the cat 3 years ago? We'll talk about BlackBerry. What was their recipe for success? First, they had a business focus, the keyboard, the BBM, and they had a history of security for businesses. Then, after that, after several beautiful years, everything was beautiful, BlackBerry collapsed. First, because they forgot the smartphones and the multi-tactile screens, and they said, our screens are perfect and the keyboards are so perfect. But they underestimated the importance of the app stores. And one of the main messages we're going to talk about has to do with ecosystems. And I will finish by giving you the best example I can think of an ecosystem or platform. They also underestimated the impact of Android, something that Samsung did not do, and see where Samsung stands today. And they allowed WhatsApp to become a standard who finish their own market. If the Android platform grows so tremendously, you should not become stagnant. You should try to move into those markets. They said no, and see what happened to them. So today, what do we have? It's amazing, but in 3 years' time this happened. BlackBerry has less than 1% of the global market in cell phones. And the figure is 0.6%, in fact. What happened to Nokia? Look at this image. 2 years ago, the screen. First, the recipe for success was that they had a great distribution network. The second, they created very practical cell phones, low cost and lasting. And the third, they focused so much on the businesses and consumers like a laser beam. But what led to failure? Similar to BlackBerry, they underestimated the smartphones. They had a smartphone before the iPhone, but even then, they did not see that was going to be the future. They adopted Windows Phone instead of Android when they decided to reinvent themselves. That was stupid. Looking at the graphs and the statistics, we knew Android was going to be the future. So why should you move to Windows Phone? And thirdly, they lost their identity before Microsoft. This is a very long story. I told you about it last year. But today, the company is irrelevant, and it has dissolved within the bureaucratic structure of Microsoft. Now, regarding Microsoft, Their success, well, it was a very successful company. It was the Apple of the day or Google of the day. But they started associating to a larger fish, IBM, and they had MC2, and you know the story about this. Then they created a platform, and here we go back to the ecosystem. We call it Windows Platform. And that led to other ancillary services like Visual Basics, etc. And they were able to determine that that platform was by default the platform when manufacturers would sell PCs. They sold PCs but with Windows Platform, and they created integrated tools for business or home productivity like Office products. Recently, they created the Xbox division, and today this is where they're doing a good job, business services on the cloud. But what happened? What was it that led Microsoft to the present situation? First, the failure recipe. They chose Steve Ballmer. I was saying, please remove him from the position. He was substituted by Satya Nadella, who came from Microsoft. I would have liked someone from abroad, but he was the best option they could have made. Apart from that, they created a lot of confusion at the level of consumers by presenting different operation systems like Windows Basic, RT, WP8, interface was too radical for what people were used to. And not only that, it was very confusing. It could be radical, but it could be easier as well. Apart from that, they had Windows Phone 3 or 4 years later. So Windows Phone, as it is now, at the time when Google was beginning, that would have been a better opportunity. The Surface tablets were very expensive. They arrived too late at prices between $900 and $1,300, and also very late. And in the end, what happens? The tablets, the smartphones, and the Chromebooks are eating up the markets. For different reasons. Today there are many things we can do with a cell phone. We don't need a PC. The PC is becoming a niche for professionals or people who do very specific things, Photoshop, design, Excel, and so on. Okay, let me mention Sony. I never talk about Sony because we can learn a lot from Sony. First, their success recipe was that the company was always spearhead. Maybe those my age remember the Trinitron TV sets, the Walkman. And they created a cool image. They were modern, updated. I remember when I was a young man, Sony was like Apple today or a new iPhone. Now, how did they fail? They stopped innovating. And the second lesson, they did not want to get rid of their golden egg hens. They said, well, we have the Trinitron tradition and we are making so much money with this that we don't want to damage the sales. Oh, we have this beautiful Walkman. There is MP3, but we will stick to the Walkman. And so I'm not going to do something new. That was the mindset, which was absolutely mistaken in my opinion, because if you have a product, you don't need to produce a product to kill your own product. This is what Sony did, and many other companies did the same. So I said, contrast with Apple. What did Apple do when iPod was launched? They used iPhones inside, even though that meant killing iPads, and they did the same with the MacBooks and the iPads. They said maybe this will leave us without sales, but let us invent this before somebody else does it. So what does Sony need to do if it wants to be reborn? Well, they need to invest in advertising. They need to take advantage of PlayStation 4. They need to recover their cool factor among consumers and lead with new products. Let's very quickly talk about Google now. This is one of my three favorite companies. What made them be so successful? They chose algorithms versus human beings when looking for information in the internet. Yahoo was much bigger than Google at the time. They had a huge group of thousands of people looking for information and doing manual classification. And people said, how come? Internet is growing so quickly. We will have millions of pages, and we won't be able to do this with human beings. So we have to use algorithms, that is to say, automated programs that are like robots that do these things instead of human beings doing that. Then they detected gaps in the market, and they decided to join that. The first was Gmail, then Outlook, Hotmail in the internet, but Gmail was revolutionary in the way emails were conceived. They saw that the future was in the web. So then they did Google Apps, then they called it Google Drive, and Microsoft Office is one of the parts, Android, Google Cars, etc. And they modeled Android in relation to iOS, which is a very good decision. Before the iPhone was launched, Android was going to be a copy of BlackBerry, a square screen with a keyboard, and then Steve Jobs said iPod 1 is out, and they redesigned the system and they accommodated it to the future. This is what many companies should do. The other thing was that Google failed. It's not going to happen now, but there's something that could lead to failure. First, advertising is moving to mobiles, both in the web versions and apps versions. If I have an application in the apps with lots of data, Google has access to that. It doesn't have access to those data, and Google is doing something in this regard. And the other thing is the social networks. What happens with Facebook? Facebook knows who you are, your age, what you do, what you like, and what your friends like. And therefore, when advertising, they can be very specific so that the advertising is efficient. And mobile advertising has increased a lot in Facebook. The other thing is when you want to cover too much instead of focusing on doing a few things correctly. Google has so many projects. I would like them to focus on one or two of them. Also, let me talk about Android's fragmentation. They were going to take steps last year, but what is Google doing now? First, if you manufacture Android and you want your equipment to say this is Android, you need to do this. That is, first you have to promise 18 months of updating of the operation system. And this is compulsory. Second, you need to install the Google Play services. Those are like libraries, low-level libraries installed in all the Androids, and they have the Google mark inside. And Google has the capacity of updating these libraries regardless of the Android program, regardless of the versions you have. The other thing you have to do is compulsory to activate OK Google. When the browser, the voice browser comes out, you have to say OK Google. So this allows for more advertising. If you ask other browsers, look for this, look for that, the advertising will be done by somebody else and not by Google. They will ask you also to install 20 Google applications like Google Play, Google Maps, whatever. And then you have an option that if you want to share part of your profit of what you sell through your phone, you can do that if you don't install applications that compete with us. So Google is saying, let me control Android much better than I did in the past. I don't know how many of you know about this. Many of us are developers, but there are we have two types of Androids, the Android Galaxy or LG, but we have the open source Android project. That's a version that anybody can take up and create your own cell phone. So far, that has not been a problem for Google, except when Amazon created its own version of Android. Now, in the last year, let me tell you what happened. In the meantime, look at this thing here. In China and India, in the first quarter of this year, the open source Android version grew by 20%, while the normal one grew by 3%. So maybe on that basis, Google thought, let me create Android One version. It's a cell phone that is less than $100. That is to say, a cheap version of Android with all the services, because Google lives on advertising. The blue part is Android's market in smartphone operations. All the rest is BlackBerry and many others. And look at this other pie chart. The blue, the light blue of the pie, is the open source Android that Google does not control, where there are no Google products installed. It's represented by 25% of the Android cell phones that are being sold. And you see why Google has taken those steps that I read before. Now let me talk about Samsung. Samsung has two success recipes. The first, imitation. They said, let us imitate, let us do a good job. And that is why the Galaxies are very similar to the iPhones. If you go to Samsung shops, they are designed like the Apple shops with the electric connectors, the boxes, everything. And the other thing is massive advertising. When I mention this figure, nobody believes me. Last year, Samsung invested $14 billion just doing advertising. And that is why Spain today, we know Galaxy more than Android. And in Dominican Republic, where I live, I never saw an Apple advertising, but the Samsung are everywhere, on the television, radio, everywhere. And this is what creates brand awareness. People know about the brand. Now, what could lead Samsung to failure? I have an idea. First, China. These three brands, Huawei, Xiaomi, and Lenovo, are beginning to grow because they are creating Android cell phones versions with better specifications than the Galaxy at less half the price. And rumor has it that they are being sold in large amounts. Android One is another issue. What is the meaning of this for Samsung? Is this Android One are sold, they are very cheap, so many people will question, why should I pay $600 for a Galaxy when I can buy for $100 the Android One? So Samsung's profits will have to go down, prices will have to go down. In addition, they have to pay continuous patents to Apple and Microsoft, and that represents over $30 per unit. If your cell phone sells at $700, that's one thing, but if you start reducing prices, there will be a difference. Their operation system, TITANS, was not successful, so what is the future recipe for Samsung so as to come out of that situation? Well, they could do a future fork of Android, as Amazon did. They even have all these other technologies that could substitute what Google offers them, like the chat-ons, the Here Maps instead of the Google Maps. But Samsung is in a difficult situation because I read that they did a contract with Google. They are legally binding contracts, and we'll see what happens in the near future. Now, this pie chart shows, these are two graphs. On the left, you see how these Chinese manufacturers are growing in comparison to Samsung. Samsung has 25% of Android sold. Before it had 50%. But today, the largest part of the pie is by other competitors due to prices. If you work and you sell the same operation system and applications, when you have competitors in prices, this is a problem. On the right, On the right, we have the growth of Samsung's mobile phones. Look at this. I have to get closer. No, that was the previous. Here it is. Here on the right, you see that in 2012, Samsung had 20% growth, but by 2013, the third quarter, it was 30%. The first quarter of this year, it was stagnant in 0, and then it went down almost 25% compared to the previous growth, which is dramatic. Amazon, these are my favorite companies. What was their success recipe? They sold easily, and they created a very simple and global payment platform. I could buy with my credit card as if I were an American citizen. I get emails. They make recommendations. We have Amazon Prime. You pay just one price a year. I think I paid $70, and I can download films, videos, music, whatever. The Amazon Cloud was developed for them, but then they realized that it could be rented out for third parties. This is called Amazon Web Services, I think, here. They also wanted to obtain commissions for the sale of services and products, like what they did with the tablets. The tablets are $170 to $100, but then they make money by selling books, games, programs, etc., music even. Then, apart from that, they created two studies. One was for original contents, for films, for games, for video platforms, and they created a study for original games for their own platforms. Now, what could lead them to failure? They won't die that easily. First, the Fire Phone. It should have been low cost, and it was released at a very high cost, and it competed directly with the price of an iPhone or a Galaxy, which was very stupid because it left the primary philosophy of the company. It's not to make money but sell cheaply and then sell services that support. That was their big mistake. If they don't learn from this mistake, the next version would be more costly. Then they included Alibaba in the Western world. Alibaba is a business, a combination of Amazon and eBay in China. But in China, it's for the East. It's a monster. Sometimes people are not aware of how enormous it is. Last year, Amazon sold $74 billion, and Alibaba sold $420 billion, and 2 years before $170 billion. And this is the monster that Amazon will have to face in its own backyard and in the rest of the world. So this is what they have in future. Facebook, what happened to Facebook? Their recipe for success was to respond, what are my friends doing, or my girlfriend? And second, they created a very addictive platform that is very easy to use. Remember the other one, MySpace. Remember MySpace? It started very beautifully, but then it was so free to customize that you could hardly surf the page. Now, the sale of advertising was very effective. Just to give you an idea, in the first quarter of this year, the sales was of $2.27 billion, and $1.3 billion came from mobile phones that account for 59% of Facebook income. Apart from that, they bought Instagram with 200 million users. They bought WhatsApp. I will talk about it. The Oculus Rift, which is a virtual reality technology. And in my opinion, WhatsApp was a brilliant acquisition because this program gives you the opportunity to create standards that will substitute all the systems that we have today in analogous telephone. We saw Skype, we saw the Google version, etc., etc. But there is not one system that can be used in any device. So, and I think if Facebook gives its future to WhatsApp, this is going to change the whole game. So, how could they fail in future, apart from the fact that people will get bored of using Facebook? Well, spam out of control. If you have such a platform, it's very tempting to use all kinds of spam. And I have a Facebook group, and you know, I get so much spam every single day. The other thing is that there could be a transition to other more dynamic, real-time social networks. But Facebook has so much money that they will do the same as they did with Instagram. If nobody wants it, we'll buy it. Twitter. The recipe for success was a very simple platform, easy to understand. It was, as I would say, most impulsive, because if you had 10 seconds in your life, you would do it quickly, right away, and it's easy, I use it. How would it fail? Well, they don't have a clear recipe to make money. They are experimenting with two recipes, one to increase advertising, as was to be expected, and the second to add a button to buy. What does it mean? If you are a company and you have a Twitter account and you want to sell your products, you can announce with a tweet, click here to buy, and people can buy. Let's see if that works. In the future, if they don't make enough money, it will be acquired by a larger fish. That's what always happens. Google, Apple, who knows? Apple, what happens with Apple? What is the success story? They have an absolute control of their ecosystem, like microprocessors, operation system, applications, and even the way in which you access the App Store. Second, innovation, simplicity, integration, but not necessarily being the first. Look here, iPod was not the first device to reproduce digital music. Before the app stores, there were other successful things that were similar, and lots of technology like Siri, etc. And one thing they did, they tried to do the products as best as they can, with the exception of maps that have been a failure. In future, maybe we'll see two new products by Apple. One is the new iPad for children, educational, professionals, hopefully with a digital pencil. If they can make it, that will bring other applications into the iOS ecosystem, far from OS X. And the other product we'll talk about later on. Another thing that Apple could do was create what Sony did, like creating a cool and wow aura. Maybe they are not that cool or wow, but people regarded them as such.
The other thing is that they, and this is the basis for Apple's success, is that it created a business with very high margins because it was different from the competition and didn't adopt the technologies from the competition. Have you seen the graph where Apple had like 12% of the market? Well, Apple by itself now commands more than 70% of all the profits of the cellular world. So if there's someone who's laughing at everybody, that's Apple probably. Apart from that, it created some sort of iPad dependence of users to its platform because everything is so well integrated. I have everything there and I don't want to change that. And that's what Google is doing with Android, the more it integrates and controls its platform. But there are two things that could lead Apple to failure. One, if they stop innovating. When people stop making new things that wow people, that's how as far as they get. And then there is the Android factor, which is putting more and more. And at a certain point, the iPhone people are going to say, wait a minute, why am I paying so much when this other is doing the same and costs $300 less? So Apple needs to go one step ahead, as it's doing with Apple Pay, as I will mention in a couple of minutes. But changing now, what are the recipes for success today? You might know many of them because you're developers. And you're at an event where you talk about these things. So first thing are mobile apps. And I will give you an example of figures from Apple. Google is not very good at giving figures. Apple has more than 1,250,000 apps. It has more than 6 million developers that are registered. I really doubt that even half of them are programming. But it has been downloaded more than 50 billion times. And the interesting part is that they have paid more than $15 billion to developers. And half of that money was paid last year. So there's a lot of money to be done if you have innovative things to do. And you can expect similar figures from Android as well. The other recipe for success today are social media. As you know, the advertising and to viralize information. Facebook, this is a number of active users it has, not just accounts. 1 billion are accessing Facebook through their cell phones. Twitter has 275 million, and Instagram has the amount you see on the screen. These are the ones that are most likely to succeed in the future. I put two things here. JavaScript, which in my opinion has become the most important language in the world at a global level. And it will continue to grow and to evolve. In terms of the browser and in the server, the Node.js technology, which is basically they took the JavaScript engine from the Chrome navigator. They added some libraries, and that's what Node.js is today. And then we have NoSQL, that is to say non-relational databases. I recommend two, which is MongoDB and Redis, which provides the same features as SAP HANAX. It has an extremely quick database. Then we have the cloud. And this looks like a GeneXus conference because we're talking about everything that GeneXus does here. We're talking from personal clouds up to more corporate clouds. I was told about the remaining time there. That's why I'm in a hurry. We will see that there's a massive migration from desktop to web applications. And I'm not talking about running a business application and doing a form on the web. We have been doing that for 15 years. I'm talking about truly native applications that require a local sector to work well, such as Photoshop, AutoCAD, etc. Even today, something that we see is that IDEs or software development environments equivalent to Visual Studio, etc., are already moving to this WAP version. I will skip all this because you can read it on the screen if you want. Something interesting about this model is that it can become a subscription model. So instead of selling your software, you can tell your client that it's on the cloud, but it will cost $10 more. So you have an additional source of income there. Something else that you have there are the Autobots. 3 years ago, I made a presentation as telling you how a day would be in 10 years from then. And I talked about robotic cars, and this is now being a reality because in California, since September, you can have these sort of Autobots from Google in the city. And in terms of the business models that will affect us as developers, Google is thinking about having a patent for giving you free transportation as long as you are willing to have ads. And this is something that I also mentioned in my presentation before. Something that will come are 3D printers that have a lot of potential for creating software, for selling and creating objects. And you can do almost anything with 3D printers: clothes, makeup, bones, tools, musical instruments, anything. I will skip this part about virtual reality and augmented reality, but this is something that's coming to it. Then we have virtual assistants. The idea is that in your applications, you will be able to respond through voice to other people. Then we have drones. That's another thing that's an opportunity. I have friends in Dominican Republic that are doing things with this, and when you're playing golf, maybe if you want to have a drink, it will be brought through a drone. And then we have Amazon Prime Air, and this technology allows you so that in less than 30 minutes you can receive almost 86% of the items that they're selling. And then we have Google Project Wing, which does something similar, which you see on the right. And the use for this is endless: rescuing, monitoring, mapping, harvesting, anything. Another thing are intelligent garments and accessories, which is mixing fashion with technology. And that's something that's not new. Casio has been selling these type of watches for 30 years. As a kid, I saw these announcements in the magazine Mecánica Popular. We saw many of these devices that allow you to stay fit. And then the last one of this was Apple Watch. Something that we have seen are intelligent homes. What has happened there, there's not a standard there. Google tried to do something with Android at home, but what I think is that Amazon has created an internal department, which was supposedly secret. But probably when Apple gets into this market and creates a standard, then the Google version will come up. And there we will have thousands of applications, from managing your shower, anything. What else? Everyone knows big data, which was a keyword I used last year, and then business intelligence. And I will recommend you a book which answers the question, what is intelligence? And it's called On Intelligence, and it was written by Jeff Hawkins, which was the inventor of Palm Pilot. And he says something. Intelligence means to have extended memory, to be able to recognize patterns, and to be able to have predicting power. And this is precisely what any business needs nowadays in order to grow. It needs to obtain as many data as possible from clients, and you need to mine those data to have patterns, and then you need to be able to make predictions for the future. That's many times what makes a difference between a winner and a loser within a single industry. Other things, I still have 3 slides left. We have massified e-payments in Asia or Japan and South Korea. Yeah, they have been working with e-payments for more than 10 years already, but they are very local things. In our world, no one feels so comfortable with e-payments now, but I think the time is coming. Tomorrow, Nicholas will be talking about bitcoins at this time and at this place, but I think that this year's technology was Apple Pay. So what does this do? If Google has Google Wallet for 3 years, but no one's paying with Google Wallet, so what's the special thing about Apple Pay? First, it has 8 million credit cards, active and registered credit cards. It already has a passbook application that almost 95% of its users can manage their credit cards, etc. And then it has Touch ID from 5S up to 6 that was released right now. You can log on to that payment networks. Another thing that Apple did was that they told every credit card, we want you to give us the same payment rate as if you were paying with a physical credit card. Store pays differently to a credit card depending on whether they receive the payment virtually or physically. And Apple managed to convince credit cards that if they are being paid virtually, they need to have the same rate. Apple said also, anytime someone pays through my system, I will retain 0.15% to the bank. That's a bank, that's a commission they will get. And another thing is that this platform is extremely safe in the sense that credit cards, unlike any other payment system, is never transmitted when it comes to paying. Apple has created a one-use-only token for that transaction. So if anyone steals that, it won't be used by anyone. This is something that I want to show you very quickly. And this is, shows how easy this system is in terms of usage.
Simplemente tienes que poner tu dedo
Within range of that
y ya
reader.
pagaste.
You put your finger and then you've paid. That's it. So this means that in order to pay with Apple Pay, you don't even have to turn on your screen. Just by getting closer, because of the NFC technology that iPhone 6 has, automatically activates a payment system. It's just that, oh, all you have to do is this. Put your finger, and then you've paid. If you want to change your credit card, you just have to click a button, and all the other cards come in. Apart from that, they created a system that is integrated to their app store. So you can go to a restaurant that doesn't have that POS, but if it has an application that you have developed that is integrated with Apple Pay, when it comes to paying, you just do click and you've paid. Easy. So, what I also wanted to say, what's interesting about Apple Pay? Unlike Google Wallet that had a totally fragmented ecosystem, Apple has a capacity, since it controls all of its ecosystem, to have a rollout of Apple Pay to its hundreds, millions of users concurrently. So this means that there's more knowledge to consumers about that payment method, and you can trust them. And once you have all your data, by paying in such an easy way, then the people from Google Wallet will want to use it. And this happens a lot. And this is my last slide, I think, or maybe the one before the last. There are recipes that are intertwined here. Google and Apple depend from each other for the market to move on. I'm talking about the chef's recipes or custom-made recipes, which is what Google does. The large screens of iPhone 6 and the keyboard, this was inherited from Android, and Apple had to respond to the market pressure. Now that Apple Pay will be more popular, then there will be other payment systems such as Google Wallet that will become more popular. And this is my last slide. All this boils down to one thing: the importance of creating platforms and ecosystems that control the whole user experience end to end. And an example of that was the IBM mainframes. There they control the OS, the hardware database. Then we had Microsoft Windows. Then what Apple is doing with iOS and Google Android. And my final thing is that now we're getting into a new stage that has started for many years, and this is the meta platform stage. This is fed by other platforms, and you can exploit it more for whatever you want to do. And that type of meta platform is made up of three basic components: the mobile part, the human factor, and the Google part. And what platform do you know that has those three features nowadays? 10 points for you. So what's the final recipe for GeneXus today? 1, they have managed, in my opinion, to achieve incredible integration with so many technological and diverse systems, databases, different programming platforms, mobile, tablets, etc. Number 2, they have managed to create, in my opinion, a business language that abstracts those technologies based on the KB that GeneXus has. So you think at a higher level. And number 3, they have managed to create a whole community of people, that's us, who are here around a solution. And that is why I think that they deserve a round of applause. And thank you very much.
Whew.
Y para más recetas.
And if you want to have more recipes, you have my Twitter and my website. And I talk about this constantly. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you very much.
Preguntas o algo.